I would like to welcome you to the session Past Prepared for Nigerian CAs who are interested in achieving their Canadian CPA. My name is Mike Levy. I'm a co-director of PASS. You'll be meeting my partner Ira a little later. Before we begin the formal presentation, I'd like to make an important point. Getting your Canadian CPA is not a walk in the park. It's not easy. If I were to tell you it was easy, I'd be lying to you. However, with patience, persistence, discipline, and the right attitude, it is very doable. It is very achievable. So let's take a look now at the components of what I'd like to cover over the course of this session. We'll start with an overview of the CPA program and the CP, very high level overview. We'll then talk about changes in the CPA program that are planned for O27. Some of you may be aware that CPA Canada is planning to pretty much revamp the program in the future. Given that this is a case-based exam, we'll talk about preparing for the case writing aspect of the exam, as well as beefing up your technical knowledge. Point number 4, we'll talk a little bit about the CP program PASS developed specifically with international students like Nigerian students in mind. We realize that the needs of students who trained outside Canada is quite different from those in Canada. So that's why we prepared specifically a very special program designed for their needs. We'll then talk about scheduling the writing of the CP. We'll show you some testimonials, which I think you'll find interesting. These are testimonials from past students who've taken the course for international students, and I think you'll find that they found the course extremely helpful in enabling them to pass the exam. We'll talk very briefly about registration with PASS, as well as fees. And then finally, we'll talk about registration with the CPA Provincial Institute. In addition to registering with PASS, if you want to take the PASS course, you also need to register with your local CPA institute. So if you're in Ontario, you would register, for example, with CPA Ontario. If you're in one of the Western provinces, you would register with the CPA Western School of Business. We'll give you more detail on that later on in the presentation. And then finally, at the end of the presentation, we'll give you some PASS contact information in case you have any questions. So let's start with part 1, the CPA program and the CP. So at a very high level, this is what the program looks like for Canadian students. Canadian students are required to take technical modules. There are 4 modules they need to take. They need to do Core 1 and Core 2. So these are around 7-8 weeks long. And at the end of each module, they have to write an exam. The Core 1 module focuses primarily on financial accounting. The Core 2 module focuses primarily on management accounting. And then they have to do 2 elective modules, again, 7-8 weeks long, and again, they have to take exams. So there are 4 modules and 4 exams they need to write. After they're finished with the modules, they then move on to Capstone 1. During Capstone 1, what they need to do is work on a big business case. They work on this case as part of a group. It's really dealing with high-level issues like strategic issues, operational issues, etc. And then they have to prepare together as a group a formal report for, say, a board of directors. And then they have to make an oral presentation to this mock board of directors. Capstone 2 is actually just meant to help you get through the CP. During Capstone 2, what students would do is they would write prior CP cases and have them professionally marked. And then finally, the student moves on to the CP. So at the end of the day, it's quite a long journey for your average Canadian student. Many take as many as 2 years to get through it. Some do it more quickly, but many take as many as 2 years to get through it. The nice thing about being a Nigerian CA is because of your MOU, you can skip all 4 modules, you can skip Capstone 1 and Capstone 2, and you can go directly to the CP. Now, the ability to skip the modules in Capstone 1 is a huge win for you. However, Capstone 2 is actually very, very helpful because you're writing prior CP cases, and that will help you get through the CP. So as you'll see later on, we do have a version of the PASS course where we do an equivalent to Capstone 2, so you're not at a disadvantage to Canadian students. So at the end of the day, if you can look at this diagram here, You're effectively exempt from 4 technical modules, which, as I said earlier, financial accounting, management accounting, as well as elective modules. You're exempt from capstone 1 and 2, and you go directly to the CP. Now, later on, we'll talk a little more about capstone 2, because as you'll learn later, capstone 2 is actually very helpful for passing the CP. So we'll talk about how we can help you with that later on in the session. So let me give you a brief overview of the CP. The CP, much unlike the exam you wrote in Nigeria, is a case-based exam. So you're not talking about multiple choice or short answer questions. You're talking about large cases. And the cases typically deal with multiple issues and multiple competencies. I'll explain what the competencies are in just a few minutes. The cases can range anywhere from 70 minutes to as long as 5 hours. So we're talking about big, comprehensive cases.
Thank you.
On a short case, you may have to read 5 or 6 pages and analyze them. On a long case, the 5-hour case could be 15 to 20 pages. Typically, a CP case has a 1-page or 1.5-page main body, followed by a number of appendices, with most of the information you need to analyze sitting in the appendices. So what you can see on this page here, this is an example of a first page of a 75-minute case. You can notice that this is the first page. I'm not showing you the whole case, but if I were to show you the whole case, behind this first page, there would be 3 or 4 appendices. Now, the CP, 3 days long. Day 1, you write 1 large 4-hour case. That 4-hour case is based on capstone 1. So let me explain what I mean by that. I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the session, and just make sure, please, that your mics are muted at all times. I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the session that a typical Canadian student goes to something called capstone 1 and capstone 2. Capstone 1, you work as a group on a big business case. And then you submit the case, you submit a report, I should say, in writing as a group. And you also do an oral presentation to a mock board of directors or group of executives. That's what capstone 1 is all about. When you get into day 1 of the CP, the first day of the CP is 1 big 4-hour case based on the same fictional company that you dealt with in capstone 1. It's not intended to be terribly technical. They're testing your ability to deal with strategic issues, operational issues. It's not intended to be terribly technical. Now, because as Nigerian students, you're not required to go to capstone 1, and the vast majority of you will not go to capstone 1 because it's not terribly helpful. Because you haven't gone to capstone 1, what PASS will do is give you a summary of all the information you need so you can attack capstone 1. So you can attack the day 1 case, which is based on capstone 1, without having attended capstone 1. So we'll help you we'll help you deal with that as part of the program. Day 2 is a very challenging day. It's 1 large 5-hour case, and it's referred to as a roll case because, as you'll see in a couple of minutes, this is the only day of the CP where you choose a role, and the issues you need to address will be a function of the role you chose. We'll say more about this in just a moment. The day 3 of the CP is made up of 3 shorter cases. The shortest is generally 70 minutes. The longest is 90 minutes, and it'll add up to 4 hours in total. These cases are referred to as multi-competency cases, multi for short. So when Ira and I refer to the word multi, we mean a day 3 case. As you'll see later on, the day 3 case can test a number of different subject areas, what the CP calls competencies. So every case can test more than one subject, more than one competency. But when you get to day 3, that's where you have a large number of competencies. You may have as many as 5 or 6 competencies. Now, what are the different competencies that they can test you on? Audit and assurance, financial reporting, audit and assurance, financial reporting, management accounting, finance, taxation, and strategy and governance. So when I said that on day 3, they can test you on many competencies, they can test you on 5 or 6 of these competencies in one, for example, 80 or 90-minute case. Now, let's just look at each day of the CP in a little more detail. Day 1, as I said earlier, is a 4-hour case. It's just one case. As I said earlier, it's based on the Capstone 1 module that all the Canadian students are required to attend. As I mentioned earlier, in that module, they're working on a big business case based on a fictional company. What happens on day 1 is you're presented with that same company, with a case based on that same company, but the company is now 5 or 10 years later, and they're now dealing with new strategic and operational issues that you need to deal with. As I said earlier, we will give you the information you need since you haven't gone to Capstone 1, so you'll be on equal footing with the Canadian CAs. It's marked separately from day 2 and 3. It's simply a pass or a fail. So at the end of the day, if you, for example, failed day 1, which hopefully you won't, but you passed day 2 and 3, you're perfectly fine. You wouldn't have to write day 2 and 3 again. And the same thing would be true in the opposite situation. If you passed day 1 but failed day 2 and 3, you wouldn't have to write day 1 again. So they're marked totally separately. You can pass one and fail the other, and you don't have to write all 3 days again. It's not intended to be terribly technical. It encompasses a lot of strategy, governance, strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats that we mean by SWOT. As I said earlier, strategic and operational decisions. They're really testing your analytic skills, your business acumen, etc. Not intended to be terribly technical. The technical portion of the exam is comprised of days 2 and 3. Day 2 is a 1 case for 5 hours, and it's often referred to, as I referred to it earlier, as the roll case. And there's a reason why it's referred to as a roll case. The case will have financial, accounting, and or management accounting. They really only have to have one, but in all likelihood, they'll have both. In the past few years, they've always had both. Everybody has to address financial accounting and management accounting. Now, on top of that, you're going to choose from one of 4 roles. You'll be asked to choose this role before the CP. The 4 roles you're going to choose from are audit or assurance, tax, performance management, or finance. You'll choose one of these 4 roles. So everybody will have to deal with the same financial accounting and management accounting issues and requirements. But on top of that, depending on the role you chose, you'll also have to deal with assurance, tax, performance management, or finance. So unlike day 3 of the exam, where they can test you on, if they want to, on all 6 competencies, on day 2 of the exam, they can test you in only 3 competencies: financial reporting and management accounting, and then, depending on the role you chose, one of assurance, tax, performance management, or finance. So that's a maximum of 3 areas that they can test on day 2 of the exam. When it comes to day 3 of the CP, as we mentioned earlier, you've got 3 cases. The cases vary, as we said earlier, from 70 to 90 minutes, but they'll add up in total to 4 hours. So it's shorter than day 2. Day 2 is the longest day at 5 hours. Each case will have typically somewhere between 4 and 6 competencies. Unlike day 2, you do not choose a role. Everybody writes exactly the same cases. Day 2 and day 3 are marked together. So if unfortunately you're not successful on day 2 and 3, then you would have to rewrite those 2 days, but you wouldn't have to rewrite day 1 if you passed day 1. So basically, day 1 is marked separately, day 2 is marked separately. So if you don't make day 1, but you make day 2 and 3, great. Just have 1 day to make up, and the same would be true vice versa. Hopefully this will all be academic, because the goal is to pass all 3 days the first time. Here are some key facts about the CP. Everybody writes the same exam across the country. So even though you may enroll to write the exam through a particular provincial institute or through the CPA Western School of Business if you're living out west, everybody's writing the same exam. It's just that the provincial institutes look after the administration. You've got 3 attempts to pass. Hopefully you won't need them all. The exam is written on computer using Excel and Word. So you would typically write the qualitative portion of your exam in Word, and for the quants, you would use Excel, which can save you a great deal of time when you're doing major quantitative exhibits. The actual exam itself is given to you in paper form. So even though you're responding using a computer, the exam itself is not on computer. The exam itself is given to you physically. Now, the exam is open book, so to speak. What we mean by that is the following. When you come into the exam, you will have access to the CPA handbook, which has the rules or the guidance dealing with both financial accounting and assurance. You will also have access to the Canadian Tax Act. It's unlikely you would be referring to the Tax Act during the exam because the Tax Act, I don't know what it's like in Nigeria, but in Canada, I can tell you it's almost incomprehensible to read. So you probably won't be referring very much to the Tax Act, but you probably will be using the handbook during the exam. And over the course of the past program, we'll talk about how to make the best use of the handbook during the exam. The nice thing about the CFE is because it's a national exam, it doesn't matter in which Canadian province you wrote the exam. You can write the exam in one province and then practice in another province. So at the end of the day, some of you may not be sure exactly where you're going to finally settle. It doesn't matter. You can write it in any province and then move 10 minutes later and practice in another province. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there are changes to the CPA program that are going to be taking place in 2027. Let me just briefly discuss them with you and talk about how that could impact you. The CPA education program isn't just being changed, it's being revamped in 2027. And that will result in the CPA being replaced by other exams. There's a complete new set of exams, no longer a CPA, it's a brand new program. Also, the competency map, which is effectively a syllabus that says what you're responsible to know from a technical perspective, will be significantly changed to emphasize a number of additional items beyond the traditional subjects relevant to the CPA designation. So they're going to enhance the testing of data analytics. They're going to add things like organizational behavior, sustainability, including environmental, social, and governance. Many soft topics that we don't normally think of as being within the purview of a CA or CPA, and in all likelihood, areas that you would not have been examined on when you wrote your CA in your home country. There will, however, be a September CP in 027 and 028, so another will run concurrently with the new program, but it's not 100% clear who will be eligible to write it. I tried to get a definitive answer from CPA Ontario and the CPA Western School of Business. Very difficult to get a definitive answer. In all likelihood, it's extremely likely that international CAs who have an MOU right now will continue to be able to write the CP. So it's extremely likely, but because you're in the midst of all these changes, they're not able to give a 100% definitive answer. But again, extremely likely, we do expect that if you're part of an MOU, such as a Nigerian MOU, you should be able to write in all likelihood in 027, 028. Now, what's going to happen under the new education system? Will there be an MOU? There may or may not be one. My guess is there will be one. But even if there is an MOU, at this stage, it's impossible to know what it will entail. Under the new system, there are 4 modules and 4 exams that everybody has to write. It's not at all clear how many modules Indian CAs would need to attend and how many exams they would need to write. At this stage, while CPA Canada is in the midst of revamping the whole education system, figuring out the MOU is not their highest priority right now. They have to get the education system in place first. So it's really hard to know what the exemptions will be. Perhaps even more importantly, the new exams, as I mentioned on the previous slide, was going to test new soft topics that I'm pretty certain you didn't cover in, I apologize, I should say Nigerian CA. You did not cover in your Nigerian CA, and the same thing would be true for Indian CAs or Pakistani CAs, who are all part of an MOU. I doubt very much in your Nigerian CA exam, you dealt with value creation, sustainability, environmental issues, right? Because these are soft topics we don't normally associate with an accounting designation. So another drawback of writing under the new system, aside from the fact that we don't know what your exemptions will be, another big drawback is you're going to have to learn new topics you never studied before. Whereas under the current system for the CFE, the topics tested are pretty traditional. There may be some additional technical you need to learn because the Tax Act is different in Canada than it is in Nigeria. Or for example, in accounting, we have standards for private enterprise that are Canadian specific. But at least you're dealing with traditional accounting and accounting related topics as opposed to stuff that really doesn't seem to relate very closely to an accounting designation. So our recommendation is, in light of the risk, I would strongly suggest you write the CFE, and I would strongly suggest you write it as soon as possible. We'll talk about scheduling of the CFE later on in the presentation. If you can write in 026, that would be my recommendation. Right now, as this presentation is being done, it's the end of December of 2025. It's certainly not too late to write in September 2026, but we'll talk about that in more detail later on in the presentation. Otherwise, I would try to write in 027. The sooner, the better. What I want to talk about now is case writing and technical. When it comes to the CFE, learning how to write cases effectively is absolutely essential. It's a long process for many people to learn how to write these large cases, especially if you're not accustomed to writing lengthy cases, which I believe is the case for people from Nigeria, particularly people who've written in the last 15 years or so. So at the end of the day, it's a new skill you need to learn. Is it a skill you can learn? There's no doubt it's a skill you can learn. It's not rocket science, but it takes a lot of time. It takes some people longer than others, and it's impossible to know in advance how long it will take you to develop the skill. So the advice that Ira and I have been giving people now, international students in particular for many years, is start to write as early as possible, because you don't know how long it'll take you to master case writing. So the earlier you start, the longer amount of time you have to learn how to master case writing. Some people will start as much as a year in advance, and that's fine, although it's not necessary. You don't necessarily need a year. But the point we're trying to make here is the longer, the better. The nice thing about the Canadian exam, the CPA, is they don't expect you to take off time from work and lose your livelihood. Almost all of the students who are writing, whether they're Canadian or international, are working full-time while studying. The whole program was designed with that in mind. Now, you're going to be learning how to write cases at the same time as you're reviewing and learning technical. So it's not like you first learn all the technical and say, now I'm ready to write cases. If you try that, you'll never get to the case writing. So the two take place generally simultaneously. When it comes to technical, or actually before I leave technical, when it comes to case writing, there's two types of sessions we're going to provide for you. One is going to be what we call technique sessions, where you don't actually write cases, but where we teach you some basic techniques for how to approach cases. But we can talk on and on and on about techniques, but the most important thing that will allow you to learn how to write cases or enable you to learn cases, how to write cases, is actually writing practice cases. So a big part of the case writing component of the course will be having you write practice cases, which will be marked professionally and which will be taken up live through Zoom or some other vehicle. So at the end of or some other platform. So at the end of the day, you'll learn the most from writing practice cases and getting feedback from the past markers. Let's talk now a little bit about technical. The two biggest areas that will be tested are financial accounting, which includes both ASPE and IFRS. You do have the advantage coming from Nigeria that you're already familiar with IFRS. My understanding is IFRS was tested on the exam you wrote in Nigeria. So you just need to learn ASPE. ASPE is basically dealing with accounting standards for private enterprise, hence ASPE. These standards are meant for non-public companies in Canada, and they were developed in Canada. So I wouldn't expect that unless you're working with ASPE, that you would be terribly familiar with it. Some of you may be working with it. If you are, that's great. If you aren't, it's not the end of the world. One of the things you're going to discover is that in many areas of accounting, the differences between IFRS and ASPE are not that great. In other areas, there may be more significant differences. But once you know IFRS, learning ASPE will involve some work, but it's certainly very doable. The second biggest area that's tested on the CP is management accounting. Now, even though the amount that each of these two areas, each of these two competencies tested is equal, the amount of studying is not. Management accounting will require a great deal less studying than financial accounting, simply because the body of knowledge for financial accounting is far greater. Also, for management accounting, I wouldn't expect there to be much of a difference between between Canada and Nigeria. Management accounting is management accounting, whether you're in Nigeria, whether you're in India, whether you're anywhere in the world. I think it's fairly universal. Now, the new competencies one new competency you're going to need to learn is tax. For tax, I don't know the Nigerian Tax Act, and I'm sure I never will. It's hard enough to learn the Canadian Tax Act for me. So the bottom line here is, the one thing I can say is obviously it'll be quite different from the Canadian Tax Act. So you're going to need to learn tax, but there's some good news here. Unless you choose tax as your role on day 2, do you remember we said you can choose your role from 4 areas? Unless you choose tax, the amount of tax that you need to know for this exam is not huge. You simply need to know compliance. You don't need to know a great deal about tax planning. So the really sophisticated tax planning is only tested on day 2 for those who chose the tax role. We've been teaching international students since 2012. We started with Indian students back in 2012, and I can hardly think of any international student who chose tax. There might have been the odd person, in all these years who was working in tax and therefore chose it, but hardly anybody does. So hardly anybody chooses tax as their role on day 2. So unless you're one of those few who do, bottom line is you just need to know basic compliance for the most part. You need to know how to compute taxable income, both corporate as well as personal. So you need to know what's taxable, you need to know what's deductible, etc. There is a little bit of tax planning, but it's at a very basic level, unless you choose tax as your role on day 2. So do you have to acquire a fair amount of knowledge in tax? The answer is yes, but it's not a huge amount of knowledge unless you choose tax on day 2. Now, what about the other competencies? We've now talked about financial accounting, we've talked about management accounting, we've talked about tax. The other 3 competencies are audit, finance, and governance. Now, when it comes to audit, finance, and governance, for audit, you're going to end up learning a great deal of what you need to know from the case writing. You won't learn 100% of it from the case writing, but a large part of it you will, because a big part of what's tested when it comes to audit and assurance, when we say audit here, we mean audit and assurance. When it comes to audit and assurance, a large part of what's tested on this exam are things like planning, procedures, analyzing controls. That you learn almost completely from writing cases. There are certain areas where you'll have to sit and read the technical notes, like, for example, reporting, but at least a large chunk of assurance you can learn from case writing. Finance on the CP tested at what I would consider to be a relatively elementary level. We will provide you with notes on finance, but they shouldn't take you a huge amount of time to get through because it's not tested at a terribly sophisticated level. A large part of finance is number crunching, and there are, just a few numerical models you need to be comfortable with, like net present value analysis, business valuations, projected cash flows, etc. But again, not terribly sophisticated. I did an MBA in finance. I would say the level at which finance is tested on the CP is probably lower than an introductory finance course at the MBA level, or less than what you would need to know in the very first level of the CFA. So it's not tremendously sophisticated. Strategy and governance, there's hardly any technical to learn at all. Strategy and governance, you would learn virtually completely from writing cases. And the reason why you would learn it virtually completely from writing cases is because strategy and governance is pretty much on the CP, almost 100% unadulterated common sense. So you just have to be willing to use common sense and then practice applying your common sense through case writing. Does anybody have any questions before I pass on the virtual floor to Ira, who will now take over for part 4? Any questions? Okay, if nobody has any questions, I'll now pass over the virtual floor to Ira. Let me just.
Hi, everyone. Ira here. I'm going to continue the presentation from where Michael left off. We're on part number 4. I'm pretty sure that everybody can hear me and see the presentation moving as I'm going through this. So similar to what Michael said, please stop me if you have any questions. I'm watching the chat box. You can either put something in the chat box or you can unmute your microphone and you can ask a question as we're going through this. Okay. So we're on part 4. So just to give you a little background on exactly who we are, I'm not going to read out every point here. We've been doing this for quite a long time. We do the national program for PwC. The truth is we've taught in all of the large firms, but you can only do one national program, and the national program that we've run for many years is the PwC program. We run it across Canada. Michael, you can notice here in the second last point, did very well when he wrote the CFE. He was the actual gold medalist, which is amazing. And overall, thankfully, we've had very good feedback from the course. I think people get a lot out of it. And I think overall, it's working well. So what we've done is we've really designed a program for international students. We've used it up until this year for people from India and Pakistan, and now we're going to use it for people from Nigeria because all of you get to go directly to the CFE, and you don't have to take Capstone 1 and Capstone 2. So this program, what we've done is we've put in here technical training, case writing, and personal counseling. I'm going to go through each of these, and again, please stop me if you have any questions. Some of the program is what we call self-study. For example, we give you a technical binder. The technical binder contains all 6 areas. We don't have classes on all 6 areas. We do have classes on financial accounting and management accounting. Look at the bottom here, formal instruction, B and C. But what about the other 4 areas? We have videos, and the areas are in your binder. So for those technical areas, you can watch videos and you can study the binder. For other stuff, like for the case writing and the financial accounting and management accounting, because those are the biggest pieces, we definitely have, we call formal instruction. We definitely have classes, technique sessions. You won't really understand what those are, but basically we're trying to help you develop certain techniques when you're in case writing to help you move up the levels. I'm not getting into the whole marking scheme, but the goal is to attain a higher level. And we even have personal counseling, where the marker sits down with you and goes over your case. And in the international program, we put in 3 of those. For Canadian students, we basically have 1 in our case course. For international students, we have 3 of them. So again, the program is divided up into some stuff that's self-study that you're kind of doing on your own, and a lot of it really is a formal instruction, and that takes you to the CFE. Any questions, comments? Is everybody good? Okay. Now, let's look at this exam as divided up between technical studying and cases. There are 6 areas, I think Michael mentioned, for technical studying. They're called competencies. The 2 biggest are financial accounting and management accounting. So those are the ones that we actually do live, not 100%, but a lot of them. And of course, we have videos. The other 4 areas we have videos for, and you can watch the videos. So look, the technical component is an important component to this exam. I don't know when everybody here went to university when they learned the technical. Some people will be more current than other people. Also, depending on where you learn the technical, if you know, I think everybody here, if you did this in Nigeria, your tax is probably different. Financial accounting, ASPE, which is for private companies, you probably did not do. So you'll have to learn that. That will be special, you know, for really in Canada. And we cover all the major topics. So look at this as kind of 50% of the exam of your studying. Call that the technical studying. Any questions? The other 50% is your case writing. Now, some of the case writing you guys do on your own. You write cases and you mark yourself. You'll have to have a marking guide, a solution. That's called self-study. A lot of the cases are in the program where you write the cases, you hand them in, we mark them, we give them back to you, and we have a class. Either the class is live online or the class is a video case take-up where we are going through the case. We're spending like an hour and a half walking through the case and showing you how you could have attacked the case, what you should have done. And we have what we call, the last point, we have what we call these technique sessions to help you in your case writing. So this is the other component, call this 50%, call the technical 50%. This is really what we're doing in the program. Part of it is technical and part of it is the case writing. Any questions? No one's asking questions. I'm too clear.
Sorry, I do have a question.
Yes.
I'm assuming that you're trying to tell us what the exam structure is going to be. For example, you said 50% technical and 50% case study. Is that the standard way it's going to be for both day one, day two, day three? Or is just peculiar to a particular day or not?
Not really. That is not really. That is not the exam structure. The exam structure, I can just comment on that because you're asking. The exam structure is on day one, it's one case, which is marked separately. Day two is also one case, and day three are three cases. But when you're dealing with a case, the skills that you need are really twofold. You need your technical skills to apply to attack the issues, and you also need what we call case writing skills. So what we're doing in the course is we're teaching you the technical and we're teaching you the case writing because that's what you'll need when you get into whichever day and you're writing the actual case.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Makes sense? Okay, you're welcome. Okay. All right. So you can actually see, I was going to have Michael maybe check this out. I don't know what these symbols are, but anyway, here you can actually see, if this doesn't work, you can definitely send me an email. We have an example of a case take-up and of a technical take-up where you can actually see what we're teaching. Okay, so we have these on YouTube, and these are the links.
Yeah,
so at some point you can
just to interrupt. Sorry. I know the symbols look funny, but they're part of the address. So as long as you click on it, once you have the PowerPoint, if you click on it, it'll take you to YouTube.
Oh, okay, good. I was just worried that's
Yeah, no, I know.
Okay.
It looked funny to me too, which is why I tested it.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so that's good. So if you want to see an example of a case take-up or a technical take-up, by all means, go into these links. The personal counseling, just very quickly, what the personal counseling is, we have professional CPAs that mark your cases. They give you a lot of comments on the case. But for 3 of them, in addition to marking your case, they will meet with you about half an hour, probably over Zoom, and they will go through your case. We call that a personal counseling session. 3 is a decent amount. I don't know if people think it's a lot or not. I mean, we're marking a lot more cases than 3, but 3 sessions with markers won't be the same marker necessarily. 3 sessions with markers is pretty good. And they're going over the case with you for half an hour. That's what we call personal counseling sessions. Okay, questions? Now, you do not have to go to Capstone 1 and Capstone 2. Okay, Canadian students do have to go. You do not have to go. That's why they signed the MOU. You get to go directly to the CFE. What is Capstone 1? So very briefly, Capstone 1 totally ties in with day 1 of the CFE. They come up with a case for day 1, and then they give you another version of the case that you have to respond to. Day 1 is marked separately. It's a pass-fail. It has nothing to do with day 2 and 3. So you have to write day 1 and you have to pass it. You have to write day 2 and day 3, and they combine, and you have to pass day 2 and day 3 together. Capstone 2 is simply practice case writing. Now, I'm going to show you in a few minutes when I show you the pricing for the whole program that you can actually do Capstone 2 with us, but you don't have to. It's basically practice exam writing. It's not really like a pass-fail. Just practice writing. So, people, one nice thing we do is there is a lot of flexibility built into the course. We offer a lot of stuff live online, like we're doing now over Zoom. We record everything. Everything is on video. You can watch this entire course on video whenever you want. There's no limits, there's no maximums. Okay, you can watch the recordings as many times as you want. We record everything, just like Michael's recording the session tonight. Okay, I have one email from a person, can't come tonight, they're in a different country. Okay, we'll give them the recording. So there is a lot of flexibility that we build into the program. We know people are busy. And quite frankly, the only difference between a recording and the live session is you can ask questions on the live session. So if you're watching a recording and you have a question, you'll email myself or Michael and you'll ask the question. We're always answering questions from students, but that really is the only difference. Okay, so overall, this just gives you kind of a bird's eye look. I don't know, there's probably about 30 classes. There's a lot of videos. I'm not saying you have to watch every single one, but when you add up all the technical videos and stuff like that, there's quite a few, like over 125. I've mentioned the 3 personal counseling sessions. And depending on which program you take, which I'll show you in a minute, you could have about 25 cases marked. That is a good number. People, that is a good number of cases marked. That's a lot of case writing. Okay, this just gives you an idea here of the type of course. It is pretty comprehensive. In developing this, we took everything we do for Canadian students and we combined it to give you as much as we possibly could, because we feel that international students really need that because you're coming from a totally different system.
What I'd like to talk about now are the past schedules for the 026 CP. When you look at the past schedules on the past website for writing the CP in September 026, what you're going to see are 2 versions, a version 1 schedule and a version 2 schedule. The classes are identical for both versions, so you're going to get the same course regardless of whether you take version 1 and version 2. So why do we have 2 versions? Version 1, you're writing the cases earlier. You begin the case writing for version 1 already in January. You don't begin the case writing in version 2 until the very end of March, March 31st. So we strongly recommend version 1 unless you register with us a short period before the CP. So for example, if you register with us around January, then we strongly recommend you go into version 1 so you can get started on your case writing as soon as possible. The earlier you begin your case writing, the better, because it can take quite a while to learn how to write cases effectively. The only time we generally recommend version 2 is if somebody registers fairly late. Let's say you were to register, I don't know, well into March, and you have the time to study enough to write the CP in September, but it's already well into March. So there, we would put you into version 2 because it's obviously too late to begin your case writing in January. If it's already March, we'd put you into version 2. But if you register soon, this recording is being recorded at the end of December 2025. If you register soon, we would strongly recommend that you go into version 1, and we would strongly recommend that you do register soon so you can get started in your case writing as soon as possible. The earlier you start in your case writing, the better. Now, sometimes we get the question, how soon do I need to start my studying in order to write my CFE? So here's what I would advise you. For those people who want to write in June of 2026, it's best to start no later than around November 2025, which is already a month ago. But there are people who contact us who aren't really that busy with work. They either don't have a full-time job or they don't have any job at all, and they have a lot of time on their hands. If you have a lot of time in your hands and you can spend maybe 15 to 20 hours, probably closer to 20, studying for the CP, then even if you start later than November, say you start beginning of January, you may still be able to make it and write the exam in June. But if you're working full time, I think it would be very hard unless you start around November. If you start much later than that, I think it would be quite hard to be ready for June. So you would need to have a lot of time on your hands if you want to write in June, and you want to start later than November. So again, if you start in January and you have lots of time, you can write in June. Otherwise, I don't recommend it. What about for September? For September CP, it's best to start, as I mentioned in the previous slide, in January. So I would try to register as soon as possible and get started. But once again, you can start later if you have a lot of time to devote. Again, 15 to 20 hours, probably closer to 20. The bottom line is that's why we have version 2. Version 2, as I said before, you don't start your case writing until the end of March, and that's for people who only begin their study process by registering with us in March. And again, that would only work well for people who have a lot of time in their hands. If you have a full-time job and other family responsibilities, etc., I strongly recommend, if you want to write in September, get started as soon as possible. Get started, right after the holidays if you can, in January. In terms of hours per week, if you're working, probably about 10 to 15 hours per week. And as I said, this assumes that you don't start too close to the time of the CP. So if you're going to say start in January for the September CP, about 10 to 15 hours should do the job. But again, I should warn you that it really varies from person to person. When people ask me how much time I need, very hard to say it's the same amount of hours for everybody, because some people are stronger technically than others, so therefore they're going to need less time for their technical studying. Some people might pick up case writing a little more quickly than others. So keep in mind, this is just an average. It's different for everybody. And you can certainly be working full time while you study. The vast majority of our students are working full time while they're studying. As long as you start early enough, that's fine. Working full time, starting say around January for the September CP, while you're working full time, should work just fine. A final point I'd like to deal with is what happens if you start with the intention of writing in June. And let's say, come along March, you say to yourself, boy, you know what? I don't think I'll be ready for June. Not a problem to change it to the September offering. PASS will automatically put you into the September offering. So if you change your mind, there's no extra cost if you switch from the June offering to the September offering in PASS. The only extra cost you would have is with the institute that you're registered with. So for example, let's say you're registered with CPA Ontario. For CPA Ontario, to write the June CP, you'd have to register by February 23rd. Let's say in March 31st, you decide, you know what, I'm not going to be ready for the June CP. I want to switch to September. They would give you back 80% of your fees. Their rule is, as long as I withdraw from the June CP prior to the beginning of the CP, prior to day one of the CP, so anywhere from February 23rd right up until day one of the CP, they will give me back 80% of my fee. So if in March or even April or May, you decide too late to write, I'm not ready to write in June. Sorry, not too late. I'm just not ready to write in June. Not the end of the world. You could withdraw and get back 80% of your money through CPA Ontario. If you're writing out west or out east, you have to communicate either with CPA of Western CPA WSB if you're out west, or with a provincial institute out east. Every institute has their own rules in terms of how much money they'll give you back should you decide not to write in June and defer until September. But PASS will not charge any extra fee to move you into our September offering.
All right. I'm not going to read these out, people. Look, on the website, we have a lot of testimonials. You can see these testimonials. We took them from international students. And the bottom line is, overall, we are happy with the course. It's basically working, okay? By working, I mean we are passing people that are coming at this exam with no experience, with a foreign degree, either from India, Pakistan, or now, I guess, Nigeria. And, you know, we're starting from ground zero, and it's working. And people are passing. So we have many testimonials from international students. And what we did is we just took a sample of a few of them. And here you can just kind of quickly read these or whatever. You guys have the PowerPoint presentation. So we're happy with it. Like I say, we put a lot of resources into this program, and I think it's good. I think it definitely is working, as long as you spend the time.
Advanced data, customization, and complex
sorry,
data.
is that a question or an open microphone?
Well,
Okay, that might be an open microphone. Okay. And here's a third one. All right. Now, people, let's just talk about registration and stuff. So, look, on our website, we have two places for international students. We would have Nigerian CAs living in Canada, and I have a feeling that's going to be almost everybody here. And we also have Nigerian CAs, okay, that may not be living in Canada. Maybe they're living, I don't know, they're living elsewhere. Okay, so it doesn't really matter. We just, on our website, divide this up between living in Canada and not living in Canada. These are the links, like on our website.
Before we go over the detailed fee structure, I'd like to share something with you that I think people will be very happy about. CAs from Nigeria are eligible for a 15% discount. So whatever course you choose, you will get a 15% discount. IRA will give 3 different choices that you could make in terms of the courses you take. Regardless of which of the 3 you choose, you will be subject to the 15% discount. If you'd like to take advantage of this discount, what you need to do is email Michael Levy at mjlevy@passyourcpa.ca before you register, and Michael will provide you with a coupon code. When you register electronically, there'll be a box where you can enter the coupon code that Michael provides you with. Ira will now go over the details of the fee structure.
Now, there's 3 options, although it's really 2 options, but let's call it 3 options. When you register, you can do option 1. That is called taking the PASS course and the alternative to Capstone 1 and 2. You can do option 2, but hardly anyone's going to do option 2. Excuse me. Option 2 is where you're taking the PASS course and you're attending Capstone 1 and 2 with CPA Canada. I'm not sure why you would do that. Maybe if you were forced to do it by your work, I'm not sure. Option 3 is a possibility. You would take the PASS course and you would not take the alternative to Capstone 1 and 2. Let me explain to people what these are, and I'll show you the pricing. Okay. People, this is option 1. This is what most international students take. The cost of the course is $27.95. This is all Canadian dollars. The cost of the course is $27.95. We give a 15% discount. So it ends up being $23.75. We tell you to purchase the Capstone 2 material. It costs $250 and you buy it from CPA, not from us. You buy it from CPA. So I'm just showing you here your total cost of $26.25. This gives you a lot of cases. This gives you a lot of cases. We're marking, I don't know, it's about, you can see here, 22 cases. 2 day 1, 4 day 2, and 16 day 3. Okay, so this is option 1. And the reason we call this, you're taking the past course plus the alternative to Capstone 1 and 2, we are marking the Capstone 2 material. The difference is instead of you going to Capstone 2 in Canada and giving them the cases to mark and paying a lot more money, you're giving us the cases to mark and we're doing it at a reduced fee and you're just getting more practice case marking. That is option 1. That's the complete option. You're not going to Capstone 1 and 2, but you're writing the Capstone 2 cases with us along with the other cases, the past cases. Any questions on option 1?
No.
I'm sorry, what's the advantage of writing the caption? You guys.
Yeah, okay, excellent question. What's the advantage? I think I heard it. What's the advantage of writing the Capstone 2 cases? More case marking. More case marking. A big part of the study process is getting feedback on cases and you writing cases. Now you can write cases on your own and you can mark yourself. But some people, they want us to write, they want us to mark their cases because we have professional CPAs and they're giving you comments. So it's simply a volume difference. That's really what it is. It's a volume difference. I'm going to show you now between option 1 and option 3 of how many cases we're marking. The total here is about 22. In option 3, we're not going to mark the Capstone 2 cases. We're going to tell you to buy the material because we think it's useful to you, but you'll mark the Capstone 2 cases on your own. Hopefully you'll write them and you'll mark them on your own. That's the difference. So we find that a lot of people want us to mark more cases because they get more feedback. That's the reason. Oh, someone's asking here, I'm starting to understand this question. Can one write CPA from Nigeria? No. Please clarify students in Nigeria. No. I get the question. Okay. People, you have to write the CPA in Canada. However, the entire study process could be done anywhere in the world. So we have had many international students, say from India. They've lived in India up until mid-September. They come to Canada 3 days before the exam and they write the CPA, they write the CFI in Canada for those 3 days and then go back to India. So when I talk about students in Nigeria, I just mean you're studying and you're in Nigeria, you're living in Nigeria. Okay, you can study anywhere because everything here is on video over the computer, but you have to write the exam in Canada. So I understand the question. So yes, you're not writing the exam in Nigeria, just like you're not writing it in Pakistan or in India. Okay, hopefully that's clear. Okay. So this is option 1.
The second option, option 2, involves taking the past course and then supplementing it with Capstone 1 and Capstone 2 through CPA Canada. This is by far the least popular of the options available. Of the 3 options, very few people choose this option. And the reason for this is very simple. Number 1, as I mentioned earlier at the very beginning of the presentation, Capstone 1 involves working on a big business case along with a group of people, and it takes a number of weeks, and then you make a presentation to a mock board of directors, both in writing and orally. It's a great learning exercise for team building, for how to write a presentation, how to do an oral presentation. But unfortunately, most of these skills are irrelevant for the CP. They're not going to help you pass the CP. So number one, this option is disadvantageous because you're wasting a lot of time on Capstone 1, which is not a good use of your time. You need to be familiar with the Capstone 1 case because day one of the CP is based on Capstone 1. However, PASS will give you a summary of the information you need from Capstone 1 to write day one. So it's not a good use of your time to actually attend Capstone 1 and pick up all these skills that are very nice, but not necessary for the CP. So that's one drawback. Another drawback is taking Capstone 1 or 2 with CPA Canada is expensive. The one that's important is Capstone 2, because that's where you're writing prior CP cases. And Capstone 2 is offered, or an equivalent to Capstone 2 is offered by PASS at a much, much lower cost. So why spend $1,400 on Capstone 2 doing it with CPA Canada? If you do it with PASS, it's a great deal less expensive. And you're pretty much doing the same thing. You're writing prior CPs and having them marked. So at the end of the day, the cost of this option is very expensive. It's almost $4,500. And at the end of the day, based on CPA Ontario cost, it's about $1,870 more expensive than if you simply go with option 1, which we looked at just a moment ago. So at the end of the day, it's a lot of extra money. The savings are slightly different under West. If you're living in Western Canada and you do this through the Western CPA WSB, CPA Western School of Business. But again, the savings are still huge doing option 1 versus option 2 in Western Canada too. The difference is slight. So at the end of the day, why would anybody take this option? In our experience, the only times I can remember people doing this option, and there are very few exceptions to this, is where they were in a firm where the firm said, we want you to go to Capstone 1 and 2 through CPA Canada, and we're going to pay for it. A third option would be to do the PASS course, but to not take the alternative to Capstone 2 along with the PASS course. In alternative 1, you're taking the PASS course, plus you're taking an equivalent to Capstone 2 with PASS. In the third option, you're taking the exact same PASS course as in option 1, but you're not taking the PASS equivalent to Capstone 2. But you are buying the Capstone material because it's very important to get the past CP cases along with guides. That's what the Capstone material is all about. And what you'd be doing if you chose this option is you'd still be writing the past CP cases, but they wouldn't be marked professionally by past markers. You'd mark them yourselves. So is this option as good as option 1? Of course not, because it's wonderful to have your practice cases, your past CP cases that you're writing for practice. It's wonderful to have them professionally marked. But if you don't have the funding, you don't have sufficient funds to do option 1, this is a second best option, but it's still viable. We have had students who've done this option. It's still viable. It just means that when it comes to the Capstone 2 cases, which are past CP cases, you write them on your own and you mark them yourselves. So just to summarize, we strongly recommend option 1. If you have the funding available, that is by far the most ideal option. Gives you a tremendous amount of opportunity to write cases and have them marked professionally. And yet it's far more economical than option 2. In option 2, you would write the same number of cases, some with PASS, some with CPA Canada, but it would cost you a great deal more. Also under this option, as I mentioned a moment ago, you're not wasting time doing Capstone 1 as you would if you took option 2. With option 1, as I said, you don't do Capstone 1, but we give you a summary of the key information you need to write day 1. So at the end of the day, I would only recommend option 3 if a student has limited funds, still a viable option, but a second best to option 1. In terms of fees, or I should say payment of fees, regardless of the option you chose, payment is made generally through a credit card. In case of financial need, we can come up with an installment plan for you. We don't charge any interest. Generally, we're pretty flexible with regard to the number of installments. We generally try to keep the installments to 4 or 5 installments, but we are flexible and we try to come up with an installment plan that meets your cash flow situation. I did a little schedule here which shows you the total cost to write the CP, including the cost of the PASS course and including costs that you need to disperse to your institute, to become a member and to write the CP, etc. If you're living in Canada already, the key figure is the 5275. So it's going to cost you 5,275 Canadian. For those who are still outside of Canada, who are in Nigeria, and they have to make the trip to come to Canada, we would estimate that it will cost you about 6,775 Canadian, which is about 4,800 to 5,000 US, depending on the exchange rates. I can't swear to you about the travel costs. It's just an estimate, of course, but I think it gives you a general idea. Most people, I believe, are in Canada, so it would be the 5,275 Canadian. If you're not in Canada, we're estimating around 6,775 Canadian, or about 5,000 US. You can look at the schedule in more detail on your own. Now, in addition to registering with PASS, as we said earlier, you would have to register with the CPA Provincial Institute in order to write. So, starting with Ontario, in order to write the CP, you would register with CPA Ontario if you are living in Ontario, you're planning to live in Ontario, and you'd register with CPA Western School of Business if you're living out west in one of the western provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or BC. So if you're living there or planning to live in one of the western provinces, you would register with CPA Western School of Business. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day if you, for example, were to register with CPA Ontario and then decide that you want to move out west. That doesn't matter. If you register with CPA Ontario, it simply means you need to write in Ontario. If you register with CPA Western School of Business, it means you need to write out west. However, if after that you want to move and work anywhere in Canada, it doesn't matter where you wrote your exam. So please understand, the reason we're saying that if you're going to live or planning to live in Ontario, you should register with CPA Ontario is it's simply easier if you're living in Ontario to just write in Ontario, and you need to write where you register. So if you're registering CPA Ontario, you need to write in Ontario. If you're registering with CPA Western School of Business, you need to write in one of the western provinces. We recommend you register as soon as possible. If you're planning to write the CP in June 26th, keep in mind that registration must be complete before March 2nd in Ontario and February 16th in Western Canada. And it can take a significant amount of time for your registration to be processed, particularly by CPA Ontario. So at the end of the day, given that it can take sometimes, as you'll see on the next slide, as much as 8 to 12 weeks. Bottom line is that if you have not yet registered with CPA Ontario and you want to write in June, I would contact them to make sure that they can get your registration finalized before it's time to register for the CP. Because you first have to register with the Institute, and only then can you register for the CP. So given the registration dates for the June CP are coming up fairly close, not that close, but we're talking February, March. Bottom line is I would just make sure that they can process your registration for membership in time for you to register for the CP for June. I would contact your institute if you want to write in June and you have not yet registered with an institute. Even if you're planning to write in September, I wouldn't wait too long to register. CP registration deadline for the September 026 CP is June 1st in Western Canada through the CPA Western School of Business. I don't yet have a registration deadline for Ontario, but it'll probably be around the same time. So if you're not writing until if you're not writing until September and you have until June to register for the CP, it's not a huge hurry to register with the Institute, but I'd still do so sooner rather than later, particularly in Ontario, where it takes a long time for them to process your membership application. So now, at this point, I certainly would wait until January to register, because if you register right now in December, you're going to have to pay for half of the 2025 year, which would be a waste of money. So at this point, I would just wait until January and register. You can start the course immediately. You don't have to be registered with a Canadian CPA Institute to start with PASS. We always strongly urge people to start studying well before their registration is processed. Because think about it. Let's say I want to write in September. Does it make sense to wait 8 or 12 weeks till they process my application, till I start studying? You may as well register with PASS and get started on your studying while they're processing your application. I don't think we've ever had a situation where there was a problem and somebody who had a bona fide Indian CA had any problem registering. So it's never ever been an issue. So at the end of the day, register with the Institute, but while you're waiting for your registration to be processed, make sure to register with PASS. So register with PASS as soon as you can. Get started on your studying while they're processing your application. If it ever were to happen, which again, I can't recall it ever happening, that something went wrong with your registration, PASS would refund your fees, less any costs we incurred, so that almost all of your fees would be refunded. But again, highly unlikely scenario. This has never occurred. And we've been teaching Indian students and other international students for many, many, many years. Registration, as I said, with CPA Ontario, for whatever reason, takes a very long time. It's quite a bit quicker if you register with CPA WSB. Regardless of the province you register with, as I mentioned earlier, you can work and practice in any province. It simply affects where you write. As I said earlier, at the end of the day, you need to write in the province in which you register. That's why I said that if you're going to be living in Ontario, obviously register with CPA Ontario, because that's where you're going to be writing. And if you're living out west or plan to live out west, register with CPA WSB so that you can write where you live. We've provided you with some useful links, both for CPA Ontario, if you're living in Ontario, or CPA Western School of Business, in case you're in one of the Western provinces. Whether you're in Canada or in Nigeria right now, I've given you a link for contacting CPA Ontario. I've also given you a second link that is specific to Nigerian students and deals with the MOU with Nigeria. For Nigerians living in Nigeria, I've given you an additional link that deals with moving to Canada. This is for the Ontario Institute, CPA Ontario. If you're out west, I've given you contact information, and I've also given you a specific link that deals with the MOU with ICANN. That is specific, of course, to Nigerian CAs. I'm sure that after watching this presentation, you may have questions on the presentation. You may have questions on the whole process for getting your CPA or the CFE or some of the past courses. So in case you have questions, we're giving you our contact information. Please feel free to contact us with any questions. You've got my email, Michael Levy's email, as well as my co-director, Ira Wallfish's email. We've also given you our phone and WhatsApp number. The two are the same. You can reach us at the same phone number through phone or WhatsApp. We've also given you the URL for the passyourcpa.ca website in case you want to go to our website to find further information on our courses or you want to see more testimonials. At the end of the day, we understand that students will have questions. It doesn't matter whether you're in Canada right now or you're outside Canada. At the end of the day, you're not familiar with the CPA program. It's very natural that you would have questions. Both Michael and I are available by email and WhatsApp to answer any questions you have and provide whatever guidance you need. I thought you might find this testimonial interesting. This is a testimonial from a former international student. I thank you and Michael for your continued guidance, support, and prompt responses to any questions I ever had. So to be honest, we take pride in the fact that we really do try to support our students and be available to them to answer any questions they may have.
Look, just to finish off, 4 important takeaways. Look, at the end of the day, number one, if you're considering writing this exam, you really should write in 25 or 26. We have no idea what's going to happen in 27. I mean, we have some idea, but at the end of the day, it's very unclear. With respect to the MOU, it's extremely unclear. The CFE will probably be gone. The system will be changing. You may have to do what Canadians have to do. We don't know. So writing in 25 or 26, you're good. Take advantage of the MOU. The process is very doable while working full time. Writing early is always advantageous. Practice is important. Starting now, perfectly fine for September. No problem for September. Technical, you need it. You don't need perfect technical. It helps you with case writing. and I'll say something now that's not intuitively obvious, you do both at the same time. You are studying your technical while you're writing your cases. That's how the process works for almost everybody. You don't finish all your technical and then start writing cases. You do both. The MOU, and I could just really almost end with this, but look, people, at the end of the day, I mean, I know they just signed the MOU with Nigeria, but we've been dealing with this a number of years for people from India and Pakistan, and it is really, really advantageous. I mean, we have got a ton of people from India and Pakistan through this exam who basically came at it from ground zero, didn't know anything about the Canadian system, started entirely fresh, took the program and passed on the first time. So we're happy with the program. The program is working. I mean, we made it pretty extensive on purpose, a lot of flexibility, and it's really working. And the MOU is really, really advantageous. You don't have to write all these other exams. Canadian students have to write. It's amazing. You don't have to write Core 1, Core 2, the module exams, Capstone 1, Capstone 2. You don't have to go to all of that. You can write one exam for 3 days and walk away with a really good degree in Canada called the CFE. So it's a big advantage. And it's very limited countries in the world. Now they've added Nigeria to this list. But up until now, India, Pakistan, it's a big win. So if you're considering it, as Michael said at the beginning, look, it takes a little work. I'm not going to say it's going to be totally a walk in the park, but it's pretty good for something that you can do while working full time. Hopefully it won't break the bank, and studying on the weekends and in the evening, and ultimately write a 3-day exam and get a really good degree that could affect your life, the rest of your life, if you're working like in accounting or, for private industry with a CPA from Canada. So we think it's a huge advantage, and the fact they just signed this is really good. Just to end off, we have a little video here, Life in Canada. Okay, fine, if everyone here has already been in Canada or whatever, you don't have to watch that. Okay, nice little success is a sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. That's a very good saying, I think, for the CFE. And that's it. All right. People, any questions? Anything we haven't covered or that was not clear that I covered or Michael covered? And that you guys want to answer? We figured it would take about an hour and a half, and I guess that's kind of what it took. Any final questions that people have?
If you think of anything after, as life has it, some of you might end the session and then say, I wish I would have asked that question. So by all means, if you think of any questions after the session, please feel free to either call or email myself or Ira, because I know with me, I often think of my questions after the session ends. So if that happens, by all means, we're happy to hear from you. You may be interested in signing up for the PASS channel if you'd like to keep informed of changes as they occur. As you know, we're in a period of flux when it comes to CPA education, and it is a good idea to stay informed. Also, you may be interested in watching another PASS video that deals with case writing for the CFE. I hope you found this session useful.